Hi there BookTube, my name is Christina and welcome back to Novel Niche. Today I'm continuing my series of wrapping up 2020 and this time we got to the part when I speak about my most disappointing reads of 2020. Of course, they're disappointing for me, so as far as my expectations are concerned or what I was thinking of that I when I was hoping to enjoy that book that much more and then I ended up maybe just liking it a little bit or not at all. So these of course are disappointing for me, and if they are your favorite books then you do you, I do me, we're all readers with different tastes. So let me get to the list. I have 7 books that I was disappointed about in 2020 and without further ado, let me get to the titles. So, the very first one that I have here is one that a lot of people love, and it's American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And this is a very well known, a very well loved book. It is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's fiction. Is it fantasy? Is it magical realism? Is it, I don't know, it's Neil Gaiman. It's always difficult to put him in a single kind of category, so I don't know, it's somewhere in between. And the premise of this book is that gods, all of the gods, all of the different pantheons, they are all alive and real, and even when you forgot about a god, he's still alive but he's very weak, whilst if there is a god who is still being worshipped, then he is kind of higher in rank and more powerful, but they all coexist, and there is this war between old gods and new gods being things like technology and the internet and pornography and things like that. So the premise was amazing. I was in for it. I had such high hopes. I was hoping for an adventurous book, for some kind of fantasy development, some kind of a huge battle of alliances and betrayals, traitors and all of that stuff. But unfortunately what I got was nothing of the sort. I don't even know how to explain what I got at the end of the day. One thing that I always say is that maybe I enjoyed it less because it took me a very long time to read it, because I was reading it out loud to my boyfriend, and I started it during a long vacation, then we stopped, then I restarted reading it months later. But still, even if it was so, I just didn't enjoy the story. It wasn't what I was expecting, it wasn't going where I hoped. I just got nothing from that book and I ended up unfolding it. Next is not only a disappointment, it's just made me feel rage inside at certain points, and you know it because I released a review for the second book and I've not even bothered to talk about the third one because I DNF'd it after the half. Because I'm speaking about the trilogy, and I want to consider it a trilogy. I won't even consider the idea that there is a next trilogy and other books, and it's The School for Good and Evil. This is a middle grade, supposed to be a middle grade fantasy fairy tale like book in which we're following our two main protagonists, Sophie and Agatha, who live in this little village, and that village is kind of every year, I believe, or every certain number of years, there is this creature that arrives and kind of kidnaps one person from the village, or 2 people, I don't remember how it was at the beginning, and just kidnaps them and nobody knows what happens after. And we're following these 2 girls who are one the opposite of the other, and they end up being swept away and they arrive at this magical school for good and evil, and the one who ends up in evil thought that she was supposed to be in good, and vice versa. And so we have banter, we have friends to enemies, we have this new magical world that we have to explore. And the first book was actually enjoyable, and it had a great message at the end of it, like friendship is important and it's not less important than love. Then the second book went places, and if you want, I have a review for that, you may watch that one, that was funny. And the third one kind of tried to solve the problems that it created in the first one, but it was so repetitive, it was so boring, it was so completely out of nowhere, and the characters, you just may see how they go back and forth with the same mistakes, the same like thought patterns, and they do all the things the same, and it's always, oh, I'm bad, no, I'm good, no, I'm bad, no, I'm good. Well, flash news, you can be a great character, for example, but no, nothing like that can exist because it's a fairy tale, so you have to be or good or bad. But then, like, there is this love interest, and they speak about the true love of the life, but they're like 12 at the beginning of the first book, so maybe 15 at the end of the last book, I don't know. It was so absurd, it was so not something that I was enjoying, that I ended up DNFing the last one, and I got rid of the series, because no way I want to have something like that in my book. Next is just a disappointment, because I was hoping to read it, to love it much more, and it's the Spin the Dawn duology. So as always I say, I adore the covers, the physical object of the book is just amazing. The problem is that I wasn't completely a fan of the story. The first one is kinda a retelling of Mulan mixed Project Runway style, but just like for the first probably 50 pages, and it goes in a completely different direction. So we're following Maya, who is a girl who wants to become the imperial tailor, but she cannot because she's a girl, and that's the job for men. So she tries and dress up like a man to infiltrate the emperor's palace and try to be who she wants to be. And of course things go downhill from there, and the second book goes to a completely different places. You cannot even imagine where the book will go before you get to the end of the first one, but unfortunately not the first nor the second had a real emotional impact on me, and that's the reason why I'm kind of disappointed. I hoped to love it much more, so now I'm still considering if to keep it or give it away, because they're beautiful books, but I will not reread them in the future, so that's a pity, and just a disappointment, because I hope to enjoy it more. But it's not the author's fault or the story fault. Some people I know that adored it, but it just wasn't me. Next is A Madness So Discreet, and this is completely out of my comfort zone, first of all, because it is a historical kind of detective thriller. I don't know how to define it, and the reason why it's here in this video is because it was nothing at the end like what I was expecting. I always tried to put this book on my autumn TBR because it sounded like something kind of perfect for Halloween. The premise is creepy. We have this girl of high society who's locked in an asylum, and strange, apparently she sees something or hears something, and I don't know, I was hoping for something haunted and creepy, but it went in completely different direction. Like, there are some parts of the asylum that are not scary because it's creepy, but they are awful because of horrid things that happen to people there and to her specifically, and trigger warnings for self-harm, for how is it called, child lost, no, when you lose a child, pretty much, when you're pregnant, and many other things. So it was kind of a little bit disturbing. I mean, I'm not very sensitive to those topics specifically, but I was disturbed. And then it becomes a detective story out of the blue, and it goes that way, and I was just surprised, and I hoped for something like creepy Victorian, maybe phantoms or stuff like that, and none of that happened. So that's the reason why it's here, because my expectations were in a completely different direction, so that's the reason. Then next is a graphic novel, and it's The Wicked and the Divine. This is here because unfortunately I could have expected it, because a lot of people ended up DNFing it or not enjoying it that much when they went on with the series, but I stopped directly at the end of the first one because it wasn't for me. It was confusing and strange, and even if the art was okay, the story was, I don't know, it never made me feel the need to go on with it. So that's the only thing that I can tell. And the premise sounded amazing. That's the reason why I decided to pick it, because we have some gods who reincarnate in a body every now and then. And so we're following them in a real modern world and what happens. But it was confusing and strange and not for me. Then the last but one is a middle grade, and the reason why it's here is because I almost never dislike middle grade, but this one was on the verge of being disliked, and it is Bloom. And the fun thing is that after this one I read another book by the same author, again a middle grade, Storm, and I enjoyed that one. It wasn't my favorite ever, but I enjoyed it. And this one, just no. Because it is, I may define it as kinda environmental middle grade fantasy, but it was very strange. We follow this girl who suddenly starts to grow hair and grass on her head, and things go downhill from there. But the reason why I wasn't very convinced and very happy with it was because of the ending, the way everything's solved, kind of strangely and with no real impact. I don't know, it just wasn't solid for me, like a little bit wobbly here and there. I don't know even how to describe it. So I wasn't very satisfied with the ending and with how the story was told. Maybe something about the pacing, I don't know. It's just that I've not enjoyed that much as I've not enjoyed it as much as I wanted to. And the very last book is one about which you will see a full review, because I was angry while I was reading it. And it's a book written in Italian by an Italian author, and it is I giorni giapponesi. This is a book that, oh my god, I struggled so much. I wanted to finish it before the end of the year because I started it like mid-year and was reading it out loud to my boyfriend, but then he started hating it. So I stopped, I waited a little bit, I never picked it up again, and then the last 10 days of the year I decided that I want to finish it and get over with it and give it away. So I did that. It was torture, but I wanted to torture myself apparently, for reasons that you will more know about in my specific review of this book. But it is a non-fiction book. It's a diary of a woman who lived in Japan for 5 years in between 1980 and 1990s, something like that. And I just hated it. It was horrible in my opinion, not as much as the way it was written, but the message, the thing that she said, the fact that she wasn't able to absorb or even accept anything of the culture of the country where she was living, even if for a limited time, even if without her direct will to live there, but still. So no, it was a huge no-no for me, and that's the last book that I have on this list. I hope that you've not disliked this video too much. I know that it can be a little bit controversial. I usually speak more about books that I enjoy, but sometimes it's great to tell you some things that I disliked too. So this is it, I promise. And now I have just one video, I believe, that I have to do to completely wrap up 2020, and it will be my check of my situation with series at the end of 2020 in order to just decide in what direction to go with my 2021 grades. And let me know down below if I kind of spoken badly about any of your favorite books here, or if you have some books that you really disliked or just was disappointed with last year, here down below. And I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye! Ciao!